Welcome to Healing Generations, a podcast creating a dialogue uplifting the importance of healing, strengthening, and supporting our communities, and that addresses the disparities and inequities in communities of color. Healing Generations is brought to you by the Healing Generations Institute, a collaborative initiative of the National Compadres Network and the Brotherhood of Elders. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on our new releases.
Hi, this is Jerry Teo, and I just wanted to thank you all for those that have listened to this Healing Generations podcast for this year. This will be the final episode for this year, and we'll begin again next year. But just want to thank you so much, and wish you all good blessings as we get into the winter solstice and the end of holidays and all of that. And we look forward to more podcasts next year. If you have any suggestions, any ideas of topics or people you'd like to listen to, please let us know. And we thank you very much and hope you enjoyed this final episode for the year. Many blessings. Well, blessings to everyone, and thank you all so much for joining us again. My name is Jerry Teo, and this is the Healing Generations podcast, part of the Healing Generations Institute. And we always, want to begin by, giving thanks and acknowledgement, and begin by just thanking Creator and thanking the ancestors, inviting them to join us, and thanking you, and wherever you're at, whatever part of your journey you are in your life, just to thank you for spending this time with us. That you're going to engage by listening, and maybe it'll touch you in a certain way. And but I want to thank your ancestors too. All those that you're connected to, all your roots, all the journey and all the messages and teachings that you've got throughout the years, and in whatever your purpose in life is, that thank you for doing that. We really, our focus here is attempting to lift up, generational medicine that we recognize is within our DNA, within our spirit, within our reach, but sometimes not acknowledged by society. But also to recognize the duality, that there's generations of pain and trauma that, present us challenges, present us teachings, present us opportunities. And we're definitely in one of those, transitional places as a universe, if you will, but we all have different challenges that present themselves to us. And what we attempt to do is bring people on that are on this journey themselves, doing their own work, but carry teachings and are about offering, teachings and service to communities. And I'm really, really just happy today to invite with us, to a good friend. She's become like an extended family member to me, a colleague, respected colleague, and really a wisdom keeper. I mean, in the time that we've been together doing work, and it's been beautiful to see her spirit and to feel her spirit and to see her with people brings spirit that way, and also to just marvel in the stories and the wisdoms that she carries in her from her journey and her family. And so really, really happy to have Mee Moua with us today. And, besides all those things that I shared with her, she carries the other side that she's, has a Juris Doctorate from the University of Minnesota. She, graduated from Brown University as well, Lyndon B. Johnson School of Public Affairs, and she has really journeyed also in the political realm of advocating for people and advocating for rights and advocating for justice. And she's the former president and executive director of the Asian Americans Advancing Justice, and she served as vice president for strategic impact initiatives at the Asian and Pacific Islander Health Forum. So, and I know she's a mom and other things too, and but just a good person. And so I want to welcome you, Mee, and give you the opportunity just to greet the listeners.
Oh, thank you, Jerry. And greetings to you and all your listeners. And what an honor it is to be in the space with you, Jerry, first and foremost, and all of your listeners. I I've been so excited about the opportunity to be with you, and I've been thinking a lot about the podcast. And in my language and in my culture, we talk about that you lulu mo chua, right? Yeah, ito to ni lulu mo chua. And what it translates into is that the spoken word has good medicine.
Mm,
And so I feel so honored to be a part of this conversation in spoken word
mm,
because I love the idea that in your opening you talk about how, people are coming into this space with us and whatever medicine they could take from here that's the offering. So thank you so
mhm.
much for allowing me to be part of this wonderful space.
Well, thank you, Mee. And I wonder if we could begin by just finding out a little bit about you and your family's journey and how you got here. We all come with that journey, and I wonder if you could just share a little bit about that with us.
Yeah. I often tell people that I come from a long line of men and women who have been always seeking, right, seeking a place to land and to belong. And so I'm a daughter, a refugee of two Hmong American men and women who were born in Laos, and a granddaughter and a descendant to generations of Hmong people who originated from China. So my people have traveled several generations across many mountains and many oceans
Mm,
to make it possible for me to be sitting with you, Jerry, right here in this moment.
mm,
The short of it is that during the American War in Vietnam, my father and my uncles were recruited to support the American CIA effort in Southeast Asia. Even though Laos is supposed to be a neutral zone, uh, the secret war in Laos represents one of the largest covert operations in the history of CIA activities around the
mm,
world.
mm,
And many of the men and women in my community, in the Hmong American community, were recruited to support the American activities in Southeast Asia. And so when the Americans left, many of our families became very vulnerable.
mm,
People like my dad were considered to be pro American and were very much in danger of being um, rounded up and sent to re-education camp. And so
mm,
because of that, my family had to flee from our village deep, deep in the mountains of Laos. We became political refugees in Thailand for almost 4 years before we were ultimately resettled in the United States as political refugees. And I was 5 when we left our village. So I spent almost 4 years in the refugee camp, and arriving in this country, not speaking a word of English.
mm,
And even more significant than that, Jerry, I was born in a thatch roof, bamboo hut,
mm,
with a dirt floor. So
mhm,
no electricity, no running water, pretty deep in a remote mountain village. And so, in a span of that time frame from the age of 5 to the age of 9, to be taken out of that kind of a village context
mm,
and to be plopped in the United States of America in the middle of Providence, Rhode Island, where it felt like everything was concrete, right? I was
mm,
coming into a concrete city. There were no trees, there were no rivers, no mountains.
mm,
Just the sheer physical differences was so starkly different. Yeah, so
mm.
starkly different.
You mentioned that, and we don't generally think of stress or trauma in that way. But I
Yeah,
can imagine as a little girl, you having relationship with the earth and with the water and with the trees and really those being your, part of your environment and part of your wholeness. And
yeah,
then you coming to a place where, there's nothing like that. And,
yeah.
you know, what were those experiences? I mean, I'm sure there were challenges along the way, but I'm sure there's lessons that you learned, and I can't imagine, what your parents your grandparents, what they must have had to decide. I mean, the decisions that they had to make and the things that they had to struggle with just
Yeah.
in order to survive. And then you arrive here. Can you share anything
Yeah.
related to those stories or teachings?
Yeah, I was sharing with a friend of mine the other day. I was thinking back to those first few weeks when we first arrived in the United States in July of 1978. Um, and I just I didn't want to be here, Jerry. I
Mm,
felt like I didn't belong. Um, uh, Arriving in this cement city, our we lived in the second story of a single family home, and our house was on the main thoroughfare
mm,
that connected the rest of the city to the main hospital in Providence. And I remember uh, it felt like almost every other second, Jerry, there was a really loud noise that would go off.
mm.
And it turned out that we were on the ambulance route. So the ambulance from all different parts of the city would have to go by our house in order to get to the hospital. And
Mm,
I'm a child of the jungle, so for me, hearing the cicadas, hearing the birds chirp,
mm,
hearing the sound of the trees rustling and the bamboo poles, rustling in the wind, like those are the sounds that I was used to, right? And to arrive in this city in those first couple of weeks where we're still struggling with jet lag, and then the sheer noise of the traffic and the noise from the ambulance. And I remember asking my uncle why the cars go so fast and why it's so loud. And he said, well, because, and I'm sure he didn't mean to traumatize me, but he said, well, it's because they have to move all the other cars out of the way because they're taking somebody to the hospital who may be dying. And so here
mm,
I am, a child of 9, imagining that every time one of those loud vehicles go by, like somebody was literally dying inside that vehicle, right?
mm,
And those were my first like couple of weeks of being introduced to life in this country. And I wanted to go back home
mm,
so badly because I just didn't know if I would actually gonna make it. Like I just
mm,
didn't know if I was gonna survive. Right.
mm,
And the only thing that I remember kept me rooted to think that I'll just have to kind of hang on is because I was one of the lucky ones who had my mom and my dad and my brothers and sisters
mm,
around, right? We have many family members who on the journey from Laos to the refugee camp would lose their family members along
mm,
the way because you have to flee like across the Mekong River.
mm,
And some of us were able to get bribe Lao fishermen to row us across the river, but others had to swim across the river
mm,
or had to create bamboo rafts. And sometimes when you're halfway in the middle of the river, the soldiers on the other side will shoot into the river because they know that people were fleeing.
mm,
And so every time you put your family and their lives into the river, you never know who's actually going to arrive on the other side of the
mm,
river, right? If
mm,
anybody at all. And so I felt like in some ways we were lucky that we all arrived together. But we hear these stories, and for my parents, the stories are real because they're attached to faces and names of relatives,
mm,
who are lost along the way and lost along the journey. And so to this day, when we talk about the journey, when we talk about the flight, when we talk about the long walk on foot from the village in the mountain through the gate checks, through to the riverbank of marshaling the courage to actually get into the current, and then just sort of maybe with a spit and a prayer to the ancestors, hoping that we all arrive on the other side.
mm,
I tell you, Jerry, I marvel that my parents somehow had the fortitude to make it through all of those transition points. Yeah, I mean, I
mm,
feel like at least I had maybe the coverage of innocence of childhood that maybe barred some of the some of the fears, right? Because I had my parents, but I can just imagine now as a parent, the level of fear, and courage and fortitude it must have taken for my parents to take that risk. Um, and I'm so lucky that both of them are still alive even today.
Mm-hmm.
So lucky.
Yeah, yeah. You know, yeah, I think many people don't realize and don't recognize really what that journey takes
Mm,
and the impact. You
yes.
know, and I'm wondering, what got you through? I mean, what do you think? In watching your parents and they're still alive. What a blessing. What kind of teachings did
Yeah.
you hear from them? From what kind of teachings came from your culture? What kind of teachings came from that environment, the trees, the wind? What did you
Mm,
learn that really helped you persevere and help your family move through that? I'm sure
yeah.
there's a whole bunch of lessons and things that maybe back then you thought, we're just living day to day, but now you look and marvel, you say, at
Yeah.
at the wisdom,
Mhm.
that our people carry.
Well, my so many different life lessons throughout every stage of life for us, right? I mean, when we first arrived in this country, literally with nothing but a backpack,
Mm.
right? And I say to people, Jerry, when we have our meetings, right? I mean, I come to a meeting with you in Chicago for 2 nights. I packed more in my suitcase than my entire family brought with us to the United States,
Right.
to start a whole new life, right?
Hmm.
Nothing but a backpack. But I always remember my mom and dad said, you know, um, there's a reason why ancestors led us across the river.
Mm.
There's a reason why our visa didn't run out.
Mm.
There's a reason why our papers are still valid.
Mm.
And it's because there's a purpose to us
Mm.
being here. So we don't have a choice but to do something with that.
Mm.
And we may not know what that purpose is, but ancestors will reveal to us what purpose we need to fulfill in this life because our lives were not taken from us or we
Mm.
were not recalled to go join the ancestors at a time when we were in the river or on that long journey from the village, into the to the riverbanks, right?
Mm.
I mean, give yourself up, right? I mean, I as a child, I remembered that. It's my parents. It was sort of like, well, yeah, that's true. Like because there were so many points throughout the journey where one of us could have been recalled back to the land of the ancestors.
Mm.
And yet, among all of us who put our lives into the current, we were the ones who made it to the other side of the river, and we made it into that airplane, and we made it to this country. And there must be a purpose to why we were chosen to make it to this country.
Wow.
Right? And
Yeah.
so, yeah, do you think I'm going to study hard? Do you think I'm going to bring home lots of A's? I mean, do you think there is got to be a commitment, right, to a different life purpose? Absolutely, because I not only have to fulfill my own purpose, Jerry, I have to make it up for all of my relatives, my relations who didn't make it across the river.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what a beautiful teaching, um, that seems so simple, but is so profound. That your journey is not just your journey. It's
Mm-hmm.
the journey of your people. It's the
Yep.
journey of the ancestors.
Yep.
But it's interesting to me, and that in spite of the hardship, in spite of the struggle, and maybe the injustice, that what your parents were speaking to you is about gratitude.
Absolutely.
Is about gratitude.
Absolutely.
You know, and
Absolutely.
that frame, that, if you will, ideology, that the spirit that they conveyed to you, I mean, is something we need today,
Yeah.
because people are struggling, and
Yes.
and in this society we don't hear uh, so often things framed that way, that you
Mm.
must go on, that you must persevere, that you must try better, that you must work on yourself, that you must do your best, because
Yeah.
it's not just about you.
And there's also the continuity, right? That you're right, that we're not just here for us in this moment, but we represent the hopes and dreams of our ancestors, and we seed the aspirations for our descendants.
Mm-hmm.
That we are intergenerational, multidimensional,
Mm-hmm.
right? In my culture, we believe that our ancestors and our descendants, that we coexist. There are veils, there are veils that prevent us from maybe seeing each other or being each other's reality. And there are rare moments, there are rare spiritual moments when that veil gets lifted, right? And you can connect and touch. And it takes really special healers and spiritual leaders and spiritual practitioners in our community who can transcend that veil. But right now, I mean, our ancestors are with us, like literally, we believe that they're with us, right, in coexistence. And so, there should be no fear, right? There should be no fear, because all we have to do is ask, and they're there for us, even if we don't see it. And that there's a that but it doesn't end with us. We have a responsibility for the future generations, because we are ancestors to the future generation, right? So even in my existence, in my present, I ought to be thinking of myself as an ancestor to a future generation, right? And so we connect in that way. And my grandmother is no longer with us. She has transitioned on to the land of the ancestors. But I remember on the night that I got elected to the state senate, Jerry, I, I was so emotional that I couldn't deliver the acceptance speech, um, and and so, a lot of people came up to me and they said, "You have to stop crying. You're now a leader. You're elected now. You have to be strong, and you have to go up to the microphone. You have to speak." And I was just so emotional because 5, 6, 700 of people from the community were gathered in this hotel room, and every time I looked out to the audience and I saw all these aunties and uncles, yeah, from my community, who look like me, who are out there, so excited that a daughter of the community had been elected to the state senate in Minnesota. I got so choked up and emotional, and I couldn't speak. So my grandmother came up to me and she said, you need to take this moment and appreciate the tears that are coming into your throat. She said, when you go up to the microphone, though, you speak slowly, loudly, and clearly. She said, and if you feel that ball of tears welling up in your throat, just know that those are not your tears. That ball of tears represents the generations of voices in our community that have never been heard. They've never been given voice. She said, from this moment on and for the rest of your life, whenever you have a platform, you exercise your voice on behalf of both the generations past and the generations to come, who often never get the opportunity to give voice.
Wow.
And so what do you say to that? When it's your grandma, you say, yep, yep,
Yes.
done, in perpetuity, right?
Yes, yes,
In
yes.
perpetuity.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just the image of what you just shared is so powerful. This room full of people that are looking at themselves through you.
Yeah.
That are in joy, with the possibility coming true.
Yeah.
And what this means to them is that maybe their children and grandchildren can also fulfill their purpose in whatever way is needed, and I know, I mean, I acknowledge you for, for being able to arrive there, but I know it wasn't easy. And I know, I mean, even as a Asian American in the political life, that is not an easy uh, position to be in, and I know that the journey that came from you being 5, going through an educational system that probably sometimes didn't want you, didn't see you, didn't respect you, I'm sure was a difficult journey and a difficult task.
Yeah.
Um, what guided you to political life? What guided you to, um, to do what you ended up doing, politically? And then we'll talk about the other part in terms of your healing part, because that's a whole other spirit, another grandmother.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Jerry, I say that if you want community, if you want to build community, bring together immigrants and refugees
Mm,
because we are builders of community. We are makers of relations
mm,
because we've lost so much,
mm,
and so we so um, yearned for that sense of community, that sense of connectivity. We have had so many bridges burned and cut behind us
mm,
so that we can never go back. And so we don't have anything else left to do but build our own bridges,
mm,
build
mm,
our own villages, build our own communities. And so I feel like that's always been a life lesson from my parents, but it's also my orientation is that I'm a builder of relationships, a maker of relations and communities. Um, and so it's not necessarily always the micro, big, building, but it's the one relationship at a time.
mm,
Yeah, it's the one relationship at a time. It's the one um, meaningful best friend from grade school to
mm,
help me make it through to middle school.
mm,
It's the one librarian and teacher who nurtured my love of reading, in middle school that allowed me to make it to high school, right? It's one relationship at a time. I don't need a whole team of football players to make me feel welcomed. I just
mm,
need one relationship at a time that would nourish um, and sustain me until I get to the next life stage.
mm,
And it was because of those kind of relationships at the different turning points that really led me to um, be thinking about how to translate that into community building. Yeah.
mm,
So after I graduated from the LBJ school with my master's degree in public policy, I went back home to Minnesota to go to law school. And while I was in law school, I realized that then the former Senator Paul Wellstone and my former Congressman Bruce Vento worked with a lot of the Hmong American veterans, and they were able to get a bill passed through Congress to allow the seniors, who themselves were the soldiers who fought on behalf of the United States
mm,
government, to be able to take their citizenship exam with an interpreter because it isn't a language test.
mm,
It's about a knowledge and content test. And they knew the knowledge, they knew the content, but they couldn't speak English well enough to pass the citizenship exam, and they
mm,
all wanted to become United States citizens. And so Congressman Vento and Senator Paul Wellstone came together, and they were able to get an act passed through Congress to allow this specific group of people to take their naturalization exam. And so within 1 year, a big group of Hmong American elders became eligible to vote,
mm,
but they didn't know how to navigate the electoral process. Minnesota has a precinct caucus system. And so if you just show up on election day, so much of the decision um, about choosing which candidate ultimately ends up on the ballot has already been decided,
mm,
right? And so I don't know, I guess I was um, passionate. I had a lot of energy to burn. So I was in law school and I decided that I was going to do this like public education campaign to get all the naturalized citizens in the Hmong American community in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area to go to their precinct caucuses, become active in their local political parties, and to become voters. And so that's what we did. And, I'm a lifelong Democrat, but I'll tell you, my flyers that I sent out were like information about the Democratic Party's process, the Republican Party's process, the Independent Party's process, because I just felt like it was really important to take these voters and engage them, meet them where they are, engage them to become involved in the political process. And it was really seated in that effort that I was introduced to the political process in Minnesota. And I became this activist by being kind of the bridge between, this large Hmong American immigrant community and the electoral process in Minnesota. Well, long story short, my state senator got elected the mayor of the city of St. Paul, and there was a vacancy. And I didn't think I would win, but I decided that I would be a candidate because it was more than just telling my people to go out and vote for somebody they didn't know. But I wanted to say to them, you have to go out and vote because I'm your daughter, I'm your niece, I'm somebody from the community. You have to go out and vote for me. I thought that would create a deeper, more meaningful incentive, right, for people to become engaged. And so I made myself a candidate thinking that I wouldn't win. But then I guess we did too good of a job that I end up winning. And then I have to say, well, now I'm going to have to govern. I mean, and so that's what happened. I mean, I wish it was because I had these hopes and aspirations and a clear path to political life. I mean, it all came about because I didn't think I would win, but I wanted to give the people in the community an opportunity and a reason to become engaged in the electoral process.
Or maybe the ancestors decided that you were the one.
Well, what's the wisdom? Ancestors don't always give you what you want. They'll give you what they think you need.
That's right. And maybe it's what you needed, but also what the community needed, as part of the journey, and that's beautiful because I think that again, what I hear reverberating is you in service to the community, you in service to the needs of the community, and you surrendering, your journey to what is best for the greater good. I met you on a different path, right? And I don't know, they're not separate paths, but it is a little bit different path. I met you as we were exploring this whole aspect of racial healing, and I know in your whole own journey, that really well. The inequities and the racial discrimination and all of that. I'm sure we could spend hours just talking about what you've seen. I'm sure. What your parents have experienced, what your families, what your people have experienced. But I met you as we were attempting to, as a group, to find a path toward healing, towards reconciliation, towards connection as then healing practitioners. And I wonder, because I know that in order for you to be in that place and do this work, there's also those teachings and that medicine in your family. Can you talk a little bit about that and where the aspect of healing or helping or the sense of well-being and health comes from in your family, your culture?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jerry, my dad is both a shaman and a healer. As is my mother-in-law, who lived with me for a long time before she transitioned. And then I come from generations of women actually who are healers, and so it's weird to come to this country and to live such a split life, right? In some ways, that the we felt a little bit guilty. I felt guilty growing up because I was the family interpreter.
Mm.
And people would say, the places where I did the most interpreting is when I took family members to the doctor's offices,
Mm-hmm.
because I would take them to the doctor's offices. They would prescribe medication. We would come home, and then they would say, "I don't know how that works. I'll take that medicine, but then I'm going to go to our healer, and we're going to do a hupli, or we're going to do an oning." Right? So there's always the synchronous, the duality that yes, we'll do Western medicine for the body, but healing the body is not enough. We need to do the healing ceremonies for the soul, for the spirit, right? So the ceremony of a hubli is the belief that when we are physically sick, it's because our physicality is manifesting the absence of our essence from our lives, or somehow we're out of balance, right? And so, yes, go and get medicine to nourish the body or to heal the body. But if your soul essence is absent, then you can't fully heal unless you've been brought back into balance or into fullness. And so then we go to my dad or we go to an elders who will do a hupli or a soul calling ceremony to reunite our soul essence with our physical self, right? And so having grown up with that, I've always been a little bit impatient with the transactional nature of sort of Western life and Western philosophy, right? That there is and there is no more hierarchical place to operate in than in a legislative body where it is power is stratified by seniority, right? There is no other place that's more hierarchical than in the legal practice, right? Where it is by procedure and the judge and the jury and the lawyers. And all of these institutional places where I was thrust into sometimes were so very different from my cultural practices. Yeah. And so I felt like as I was shifting from one world to the next world, it's almost like putting on a skin, taking off that skin, putting on the skin, taking off that skin. Yeah. And it's not unusual. Those of us who operate, right, in multi spaces, we part of the exhaustion is from that, right? Part of the exhaustion is from that. But so having lived that way, I knew that there was a healing part of me that was always there, but life wasn't giving me the opportunities, or maybe it wasn't time yet. Right? I had to ripen. I had to have enough lived experiences to ripen into the wisdom of the healing work, right? Because in my culture too, we believe that you don't just wake up one day and proclaim yourself in doing this work. You have to be called, right? You have to be called. And if you so choose to, you respond to the call, right? So if you're a shaman or a healer, you don't just wake up and decide, you get called and then you respond to it. And sometimes it's in gradations. You get to a point and that may just be it. Ancestor says that's what your purpose is for, and that's okay. Sometimes they keep pushing you and you say, okay, well, I'll go deeper and deeper. And so the transition from the Senate deciding to self-retired, not being involuntarily retired through an election, but to self-retire and to move from Minnesota to the Washington D.C. area to lead a national civil rights advocacy organization was a move, mm, but it was also in some way a search. Yeah. Sometimes you have to go far away from home in order to see home more clearly. And so I came out here and, it became a transition process. And I think I'd always been searching for um, an entry point, into the healing work. And I didn't know how to converge the different facets of my life. A child who literally grew up in this country, became a lawyer and a politician and civil rights activist. How do I make the shift or the transition? right? If at
Mm-hmm.
all, right? And I think at the time when we met each other, I was searching and I was yearning for something. Um, I was starting to feel like at that moment that I had maxed out my ability to make change. But in the world that I was in the political world, in the advocacy world, it was more dismantling than it is about um, building and constructing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I was spending the 5 years I was in Washington D.C. I was spending that time fighting the dysfunction in Congress and literally fighting the Obama administration on immigration reform and on immigration policies and the inability, right, from this country to think about how do we embrace all of our people and build community. But it was about separation, and taking people apart. And something in me just really was yearning to construct and to build, right? To build bridges and to build community. And that's when the opportunity to do the racial healing work was so attractive to me because I felt like in that space, I could come as the former elected official, the executive director of a national advocacy organization, but I was in community with people for whom it was okay to also talk about how do we heal and how do we build, right? How do we heal and build instead of just being against something? I had an opportunity to talk about what I was for.
Wow.
And that was my healing. That was the start of my own healing. Yeah.
I also see that was also the opportunity for you to bring your grandmother and your father and the medicine of that is just as politically astute, when you recognize that the true wound is not necessarily the policy, but it may be the politician. It may be the way that our world thinks and this government thinks. It may be, as you say, the lost spirit.
Yeah.
Because I think what healing is in this broken society is that we see it nowadays. People have lost their spirit.
Yes.
They really have lost their spirit. So the work that you're doing, even in the healing realm, is very political. It really is a shift of consciousness, and I just want to acknowledge and lift up, for our listeners especially, the important fact that all people of all cultures carry this medicine and carry this wisdom. We don't recognize it. We don't recognize the significance of the wisdom and the applicability that is needed right now. And right now, you talked about losing soul. In my culture, they call it susto, right? And that's where your spirit is taken away or flees away from danger, flees away from a situation where it feels it's going to be destroyed. And I remember in those situations in which there was intense hate around me in my community living in Compton, my spirit would literally go up on top, and I would see myself, And what I've understood from the medicine people is that the ancestors were pulling your spirit away. They were pulling it up so that it wouldn't be destroyed. And when the danger was gone, it then returned it to you. But now you had to do the work of putting it back together.
That's right. That's right.
And you needed to seek someone that could help you,
Yeah.
So I think we're in that journey. We're in that realm of how is it that we, as a people, as a world, recapture and recover our soul, recover our true spirit of interconnectedness and of love for one another, respect, I was wondering if you could share a story. We were talking one day, and we were talking about the issues of incarceration and the issues that happen with, especially the people of color, locking people up, and the whole, criminalization of especially men of color. And you shared with me, a philosophy and a way that your people did things. And
Yeah.
I wonder if you could share that. I don't know if you remember. You shared with me what
Yes.
happens when somebody gets has
Yeah.
wronged or whatever. Yeah.
Well, for us, when one of our people, and particularly in my communities, mostly our men, right, get sent away.
Mm-hmm.
We feel like they're torn, right? They're like a piece of fabric that's been torn away, from the main bolt of the fabric.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so when our people come back, there's no blaming or shaming actually. When they come back to the community, they're embraced with love. Um, and there's a beautiful ceremony in a way to reintegrate them back into the family, reintegrate them back into the fold or the fabric of the family and the community. And what we do is we have a huge soul calling ceremony, and sometimes the individual gets a new name
Mm-hmm.
to celebrate. It's a rite of passage,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's a rite of passage. It's not considered to be a shaming experience. It's a lived experience, so it becomes a rite of passage. And when we go through these uh, powerful, transformative moments in our lives, we become a whole new, different, and transformed person.
Mm-hmm.
And so to give recognition and acknowledgement to that, some of our men would their families, if they are traditional practitioners, they practice our traditions, they would have a renaming ceremony. They would have a blessing ceremony. They would invite the whole of the community to come, and they would give the individual a name that is befitting their transformed state that they are in, right? And every single member of the community that come to the event would come and tie a blessing string on their wrist, look them in the eyes, and say their name, and then give them a blessing. And by the time the ceremony is over, they could have like hundreds of strings on both wrists, representing the tangible mark of a welcome back and embracing and a new beginning, right? Under this new transformed and stronger identity because they've lived through so much.
Wow. Ooh. The power of culture and ceremony.
Mm,
And I just, as you're speaking, it makes me cry
mm,
because it's
mm.
it's what a beautiful way to offer someone um, an opportunity to recover a
Yes,
sacredness in their journey,
yes,
right? And
yes,
it's so unfortunate in this society we feel that we need to shame and blame and punish and really break the spirit of people even more than they're broken.
that's right,
And
that's
and
right.
and what you're describing um, from your culture is something that we really should consider. I mean,
Yeah,
and I think
yeah.
that communities are attempting to relook at what we do with people that are wounded.
Mhm.
And what do you water? Do you water the woundedness, or are you going to water their sacredness? And I think what you've just shared with us is the way that in your tradition there's that watering and that recovering of that sacredness. As we come to the conclusion here, I want to invite you because I've been with you in the work. We've run healing circles together. We've been in healing circles together.
Mm,
And I feel you and see your medicine. I feel now I know where it comes from. And I
mm,
know it comes from your father. I know it comes from the grandmothers. I know it comes from your culture. Um, but it's very evident just even in the way you speak. And I hearken back to something you said earlier about words, about
yeah,
your voice. And
yeah,
now your voice, I'm sure, is a different tone than when it was on the Senate floor. you know,
absolutely.
and the power of voice and how it can, you know,
Mm,
uh, you being the translator,
mhm,
of reality, but
mm,
now translating the medicine that is needed in terms of
yeah,
healing. So I wonder if you can share with us um, about the work, the racial
Yeah,
healing work, and the
yeah,
and what is that really about for you, and what are your hopes and aspirations, and what teachings do you bring into that work?
yeah. Well, Jerry, I tell people that for somebody who, for most of my adult life in this country, has been so steeped in policy work, and now I've transitioned to a firm commitment to people work,
Mm,
to people work. What you do and what I do is tending to the people, so that they could go and do the policy work from a
mm,
healed place,
mm,
right? Because if we operate from a wounded perspective, then what we think is the solution is tainted in
mm,
woundedness.
mm,
But if we can assist, or if we could enhance people's capacity, right, to do what they do best, to fulfill their purpose from a healed perspective, then that healing emanates in the work that they're doing and
mm,
in the lives that they touch. So I say that I do people work, and
mm,
in the people work, sometimes people are urgent, right? They mistake the urgency of the work that has to be done with that it has to be done urgently, right?
mm,
And when you conflate that, what happens is you skip the people work. Always gets skipped,
mm,
right? So in today's age, when everybody wants a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy, right? I say to some of my friends, I said, there are lots of really good consultants who could help deliver for you a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy. But if you don't do the people work, and it is the
mhm,
people who will translate that strategy into action,
mhm.
then you won't get the true diversity, inclusion, and equity work that you're looking for,
Yeah.
because it's the people who takes the aspirations, the values, and translate it into action.
Mm,
So yeah, what I do is a little bit of the healing piece, understanding that the majority of the people that you and I work with, particularly our brothers and sisters who are the frontline warriors in the nonprofit organizations all across this country,
mhm,
now our brothers and sisters in the corporate sector, our brothers and sisters in the government, particularly in this moment of the pandemic and the racial reckoning and the racial awakening that's happening, there's
yes.
such woundedness, both in the pace and the load of our work, the quickness, the urgency. People are struggling to just take a deep breath,
Yeah.
right? And what we do is first and foremost, I think, tend to the people at the most basic levels, to offer that space for some deep, nourishing breathing, right?
Mm,
To offer that space to say it's okay that you need the space to get nourishment. But it's also creating an okay space for people to think about what innate medicine they carry within themselves, as you
mhm,
say, right? We all have the innate capacity to heal, as our friend Dr. Gail Christopher often reminds us, right?
mhm,
The innate capacity to heal. And so, how do we tap into that? It's giving people permission to be able to think about ceremony,
mm,
to think about the rituals in their lives. I say, I know we come from different traditions, but think about the Olympics. There's no better example of a grand ceremony, a grand opening ceremony, and a grand closing ceremony than the Olympics. And what that grand opening ceremony and that grand closing ceremony signifies is that, all of the participants, including those of us who watch, right, who witness it, will
mm,
be on a transformative journey together. That from the moment we enter into that space together to the moment we exit at the end, we will be transformed people, right?
mm,
And so the idea of making taking people to these references, giving them permission to think about ceremony and ritual in their lives, and then just offering up some really practical tools, right, to do self care, but to think about bridging. How do you build bridges?
mhm,
How do we take care of each other? How do we just communicate with each other, right? How do we tend to the humanity that exists within each of us?
mm,
Um, really, not rocket science, right? Fundamental human, fundamental humanness, right? Humanity. Just reminding people of that. And so, um, I, I, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I don't know that I want to be humble enough to say that that maybe that's not necessarily, or some people will say, well, that's not healing. Um, and that's okay because I don't say healed, I say healing. It's the ing that I focus on. So
Mhm.
it's a process, right?
Yeah.
And we have to start somewhere. And my job is to invite you into the process when you sit in my circle. And the rest of the ing is all up to you. Right? It's
Yeah.
all up to you. We create the circle, we invite you into the circle, and we start that. But the rest of the ing is all up to you
Yeah.
because it's both an internal, individual commitment to that journey as well as an interpersonal commitment when we're in as a group.
Yeah.
Right? So,
And I hear so loudly your culture come through in your humbleness, you know, that you're merely here just to hold space and invite people in. But I know the difference. And I
yeah,
know that when you come prepared and you bring your ancestors and you've already done your own ceremony and you
yeah,
already invited your ancestors in so that you're offering so much more.
yeah,
You know, you're offering so much more. And you know, and I think that's what our people need. That's what our
yeah,
society needs.
yeah.
You know, can we really come with all of ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
Can we really share all of ourselves without having to worry about that you're going to take too much or you're going to take from me or you're going to, disrespect me? Can we really create spaces where we can honor one another and respect and recognize that all of us bring medicine and
Yeah.
all of us bring that healing, because healing really is about wholeness. Healing
Yes.
really is about that interconnectedness,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
I feel it in you and I see it in you, and I appreciate you for that. I want to invite you as your final comments. What would you say to other children like you were at 5 or 6 or 10 or
Mm.
15 or 18? What would you offer to them um, as offering that next generation? What would you tell them that maybe you wished, or maybe you heard this from your parents, but what would you say to them in terms of counsel or advice or
Mm.
just blessing? What would you say?
You know, I often think about that, and because I have my own children,
Mm,
and I've often wondered, how do you give wisdom that then is not burdensome?
mm,
Yeah, right. How do
mm,
you give direction then doesn't become oppressive?
mm,
Um, how do you set expectations that are not perceived as being too hard or too high uh, to meet or to carry? Um, and at the base of it, I think we come down to what you talked about, Jerry, is the reaffirmation. Um, that you are more than what you may seem to be in this moment.
mm,
You are so much more than what you may seem to be, to feel as you look in the mirror. You are so much more than what you may be seeing yourself in this moment.
mm,
So, every turning point in your life and every birthday that you celebrate, remember that you carry within you so much capacity, right? To be so much more than what you see in the mirror.
mm. Wow.
And what that capacity is up to you uh, to reach for it with lots of help from the rest of us. With lots
Mm,
of help from the rest of us.
mm. Wow. Thank you, me. I what a blessing, and we could continue for a lot longer. Maybe we will. Maybe we'll have another session at another time. But at this moment, I just feel in so much gratitude for you, for the Creator and the ancestors making it that we met and that we get to do work together and that we get to share and we become relation together and we can work together and laugh together and co-create together. And and I look forward to what that journey is going to bring, as we continue. I want to really just acknowledge your family
Thank
and
you.
your ancestors and your
Thank you.
people
Thank you.
for the blessing that you carry in our universe,
Thank you.
for the teachings that you carry in our universe.
Thank you.
Because without your people and your ancestors, we cannot be whole.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
you're an example of that in so many different ways. And
Yeah.
so I just want to offer you blessings and thanksgiving and love, from me to you and your family as we go forward.
Yeah.
As we finish today, I just want to invite the listeners to just to take a deep breath, and resonate with what Mee shared, that you are sacred and you have so much more to give, and that the challenges that are really opportunities, but to remember your voice, the voice that sometimes must speak loud and advocate, but sometimes must speak low and compassionate.
Mm.
And as we go forward, that we remember the humanity that connects us all, that connects us all to those trees and the animals and the universe and the earth and the sky and that sun that really embraces us all. I want to just thank you all for listening, and invite you to share, comments to us, reflections to us, but invite you to share with other people that love and that interconnectedness and that healing. And if there's one teaching that you gathered here, share it with somebody. Pass it on in that good way. We want to thank you for listening and offer you blessings as you go forward. Thank you very much.
For more information about Healing Generations and the Healing Generations Institute, visit nationalcompadresnetwork.org and be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with our new releases.